We will call the meeting of Monday, December 11th, 2023 of the Yellow Medicine East School Board to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start with a roll call of board members, beginning with Director Winter.
Jeremy LeBlanc.
Dawn Odegaard.
Matt Zempel.
Laurel Christensen.
All right, two of us are missing this evening. Then we have our agenda before us. I am not aware of any additions or corrections. Does anyone have any additions or corrections? If not, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion to approve by LeBlanc.
Is there a
Second by Zempel.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Director Christensen, will you read the mission statement?
Our mission is to provide a caring environment of high expectations that prepares every student for a successful future and instills the value of learning.
Thank you. And then we have our session on public address to the Board of Education. Anyone here that wants to be heard that's not on the agenda? Okay. Moving on to consent agenda, which is items 7.1 through 7.4, meeting minutes from November 13th, payment of claims, finance report, and enrollment report. Any questions on any of those items? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve consent agenda.
I'll motion to approve.
Second? You have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. And that moves us to our Truth in Taxation hearing with Jeremy Wilcox, Finance Officer for YME.
And I think you guys all have the power, or the PowerPoint.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So I'd first like to just cover the timeline for the levy process. The levy that's being presented before you tonight is the 23 payable 24. And the school board will adopt the final levy tonight at the board meeting. And this will be for taxpayers paying in calendar year 24. And the district will recognize that revenue in 24-25, which will be our fiscal year 25. And just for reference, we're in fiscal year 24. Truth in taxation law. So the state initially approved the law in 1988 and amended it in 2009, which requires counties to propose property tax statements between November 11th and 24th based on preliminary tax levies set by all taxing jurisdictions, your counties, cities, townships, school districts. And it also requires taxing jurisdictions to present that information to the audience between November 24th and December 28th at a meeting starting 6 p.m. or later. And then that we adopt the payable levy by December 28th. State law requires that school districts present information on the current year budget. They also require that we present information on the proposed property tax levy, which would include the percent increase or decrease from the prior year, and then specific purposes and reasons for which taxes are being increased. And then we must allow for public comment. Unlike cities and counties, a school district does not set its budget when setting the tax levy. The proposed tax levy is set, like its final set is in December, and those property taxes are levied on a calendar year basis, where we set our budget for July 1st through June 30th on a fiscal year, and we set our budget 6 months after we approve the levy. And then we will typically we do mid-year revisions for our budget. How are property taxes determined? The county assessor determines market value for each parcel of property. The Minnesota legislature sets formulas for tax capacity. These formulas determine how the tax burden is split on different types of property, residential, commercial, and ag. And then the county auditor calculates the tax capacity for each parcel based on the above. And then the county auditor divides the total levy by tax capacity of the district to determine tax rates. Certain levies are based on market value rather than tax capacity. Budget information, all school district budgets are divided into separate funds. At Yale Medicine East, we have the general, food service, community service, debt service, custodial fund, and OPEB. Last year, we had our OPEB trust that has now been exhausted and is now moved into our general fund. And then the funds that have an asterisk, those are funds that have a tax component to them. This is the budget that you guys adopted in June for fiscal year '24. Showing that we were going to deficit spend in the general fund about $88,000. The next slide, that's just a breakout of the revenue budgeted between funds and the dollar amount in each fund. So you can see general fund is our largest. And next would be the budget for the expenditure. And that's, 75% of that general fund expenses are payroll and benefits. This next slide is a flow chart that illustrates the key steps in the process of assessing and levying on Minnesota property tax. And you'll notice that the step in yellow is the only step that the district has input or control over. And that step is the school board adopts a proposed levy in September based on the limits set in step 5. After a public hearing, the board adopts a final levy in December. And final levy cannot be more than the preliminary levy, except for the amounts approved by the voters. This chart came from Ellers, and it just shows the difference between inflationary dollar amounts and where our basic general education formulas are at. And you can see they do not come together. So funding is trailing inflation in fiscal year '24 by about $1,282. And then in fiscal year '25, it's about $1,350. This next chart just shows, it shows the school district funding and then non-school local government funding in commercial and industry. That blue line is the school district, so that school districts account for a significant portion of overall property tax levies in Minnesota, but the school share of levies has decreased significantly since the late 1900s. You can notice that school district taxes have approximately doubled, while non-school local government taxes have risen close to 4 times over that period. The next slide is the steps to the proposed levy payable '24. So in mid-December at our September board meeting, mid-September, the Minnesota Department of Education prepared and distributed the first draft of the levy limitation worksheet. And then at the September 11th board meeting, it was approved to propose the levy limits. And then in mid-November, counties mailed proposed property tax statements to all owners. And then in December at our board meeting, we have a public hearing proposing levy and then the final levy certification. Now getting to YME's proposed levy. The total 2024 proposed property tax levy will increase from 2023 0.64%, or $17,783. And then law does require that we explain the reasons for any major changes in the levy. This chart shows the proposed levy broken into the general ed, community service, and debt service funds. The next slide, I just pulled 10 years of historical levy history. And down at the bottom, it'll show the total levy over the years, then the increase or decrease from the prior year, and then the dollar amount. Just wanted to touch briefly on the Aid to School tax credit. That was a permanent law enacted in 2017, which affects all existing Fund 7 debt levies except for OPEB. It reduces the tax burden for farmers and timber owners. And in 2023, that was a 70% reduction, which was up from the 22 amount of 60%. The revenue for Aid to School credit comes from state income, sales, and other tax revenue. And then just explain some of the levy changes. The reemployment insurance, that went up about $22,000, and that was an increase because we hadn't levied in fiscal year, or for the pay 23 levy. And then the OPEB change, so in the general fund, we have an increase of about $60,000. That's because we are now doing a pay-as-you-go levy for OPEB because the trust is exhausted. The next slide, so this is the Clarkfield pool. That change was a decrease of about $31,000. There were less expenses in fiscal year 23. And this amount is levied on the previous Clarkfield School District property owners. And then long-term facility maintenance bonds, that change was a decrease of $92,000. And so the district's required to levy 105% of debt service scheduled payments. We have one bond falling off in fiscal year 24, so we're not levying for that payment this next levy. Other factors causing changes, affecting all levies: property wealth per pupil, changes in total valuation or enrollment, which affect equalization formulas, increase or decrease in levy amounts caused by changes in state funding formulas, local needs and costs, and voter-approved referendums. The state of Minnesota has 2 property tax refund programs and 1 tax deferral program available for owners of homestead property. These programs may reduce the net tax burden for local taxpayers, but only if you take time to complete and send the forms. For more information, you can contact tax professionals or the Department of Revenue. So the school district's recommendation would be to certify the levy at $2,795,903.70. You can see the breakout there between the general fund, community service, and then the debt service funds. And some time for public comments.
I just want to point out, folks probably got these in the mail. You can get these from the website too, and it's pretty valuable information. One thing, taxpayers who are frustrated with their property taxes, they'll think this is the time to challenge the property taxes, and really that ship has sailed. They can challenge their valuations. That's the biggest impact. And that would be done in April. How we doing?
Trying to start
Yeah,
it.
fire.
There's a little Sparky? Going on. It's called plasma.
Any other questions?
And then you got this in November. This is your actual taxes. And you know what's great about this is you can look on the back, because this is something that we as a school district should be quite proud of. if you look on the back here, the two, well, there's some that had a decrease in taxes, but other than that, Yellow Medicine East Schools only increased our taxes 0.64%, and then the city of Hazel Run was at 0. So, very valuable information. I think that points to you folks being pretty responsible and sustaining the budget as best you can with the limited resources we have.
Thank you for pointing that out. Helpful information. Any questions for Jeremy about anything in the presentation? Okay, well, we will, we have an action item later in the meeting to approve the levy. Thank you, Jeremy. All right, so now we will ask Kyle Kruger to come from Hoffman and Brotes for the audit report.
Thank you. I handed out some booklets before the meeting. That'll be your audit report. So it's a pretty substantial document. I won't cover the whole thing. I'll just run through a few of the highlights with you quickly, some of the results. And then, any questions you have on the full document, you can feel free to get a hold of me, or if you have any questions tonight after I run through it quickly, of course, feel free. First thing I want to point out is just a few pages in, there is a document on our letterhead titled Independent Auditor's Report. That is where, I guess for lack of a better term, the overall audit results are disclosed. The first paragraph, titled Opinions, will tell you your financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. What that means is the financials in this document are, in our opinion, based on our audit, reliable and accurate, and whoever's reading them should feel comfortable as to their reliability. I'll spend most of the time going over the MD&A, which starts on page 1. This is a pretty good summary, of the financial statements and some of the highlights and things going out into the future to keep an eye on. The first page there goes over a handful of highlights that were the significant events for the year. First bullet point, I want to go over quickly, discusses your statement of net position and an increase of a little over $2 million from the prior year to nearly $11 million at year-end 2023. One thing I like to point out there, kind of a disclaimer, is that $2 million increase over the prior year is kind of misleading. The statement of net position includes a number of things that we term as full accrual. So your funds are accounted for on the modified accrual basis. They exclude things like pensions, fixed assets, long-term debt. They're more focused on current economic resources versus things coming in the future that may be funded by future state funding, federal funding, levy dollars, etc. So I just want to point out, to kind of illustrate that, on page 10, you'll see your statement of net position, the full statement of net position, versus page 12, which is your governmental fund balance sheet. You can see quite a difference between the two. The statement of net position, as I said, is on a full accrual basis. It combines all of your funds, and then we add all of those full accrual items, such as your long-term debt, fixed assets, and pensions. So I just want to point out there, if you look under your non-current liabilities, section, you'll see a net pension liability number. There's also pension information reported as deferred outflows and deferred inflows. You can see those are very large numbers. Net pension liability of $5.7 million is not something that the district is gonna have to pay in the near term or, effectively ever, aside from your routine payroll contributions to TRA and para. That number fluctuating such a large amount doesn't impact how you're contributing to those funds. That's set by the state legislature. For para, I believe it's 7.5%, TRA is around 8.5%, in that neighborhood, that the district contributes per payroll. And these numbers you're seeing here are actuarially determined. They are projections. They are basically the district's share of TRA and para's liability that they're projected to owe going forward based on all sorts of demographic data, assumptions on markets, what's gonna happen going forward. It's somewhat similar to your OPEB valuation, how they take your projected liabilities, discount them, factor in all sorts of assumptions in terms of mortality rates and things like that, and come up with a large number that, as you guys know, doesn't necessarily mean you're on the hook for that number this next coming school year or anything, even close to that. So I'd just like to point out that page 12, if you look at that in contrast, looks much different and maybe, more familiar in terms of what you guys see in terms of budgets and finance reports and things of that nature. So, on page 10, you'll see an unrestricted fund balance of negative 3.2, 3.3 million roughly, whereas your unassigned fund balance on page 12 is 2.7, 2.8 million. So, my suggestion is just to page 10, 11, if you're looking at those with any sort of, decision-making intent, just to kind of, use caution in terms of, using those numbers to make any sort of future decisions. So back to that MD&A on page 1, where we say the statement of net position increased by 2 million. A lot of that has to do with some of those adjustments made for pensions this year, and does not by any means, indicate a $2 million cash windfall for the district or anything. That should be factored in terms of spending going forward. You'll want to rely more on your fund level financial statements for that sort of analysis, which that second bullet point there actually says your general fund balance decreased $391,000. Unassigned fund balance still amounts to roughly 27% of your annual budgeted expenditures. The district has set a goal of maintaining 12% of its expenditures, annually in the unassigned fund balance. So you can see, compared to your benchmark, you're pretty healthy in terms of that ratio of your unassigned fund balance to expenditures. So again, just wanted to point out that contrast. You can see there's quite a big difference between those two bases of accounting. General fund assigned fund balance for projected budget deficit. So that is talking about your projected budget deficit going into the 2024 school year versus your 2023 decreased roughly $200,000. So for 2023, you projected a budget deficit around, the neighborhood of $200,000 larger than your deficit going into 2024. COVID-19, again, was a significant issue for the district in 2023. A significant amount of ESSER money was used by the district, such that a single audit was triggered. Again, that was the case last year as well. So this year, we performed a single audit on the food service program and that ESSER program, which, for those unfamiliar, a single audit is basically a federal program-specific audit where we audit compliance of the use of those dollars. So nothing significant in terms of findings came back there. We did comment that a federal procurement policy wasn't put in place before the year started, but was addressed during the year. So you'll notice we did report that in the audit, but that finding is effectively resolved as we sit here today. So nothing major. GASB 96, a new accounting pronouncement on subscription-based information technology arrangements, was implemented in 2023. What that did was basically the same as a pronouncement in the prior year regarding leases, where any long-term type arrangements require capitalization onto the balance sheet as an asset and a corresponding liability. No major impact for the district for fiscal year 23. There was a small number related to curriculum that could have been capitalized if determined to be material. Discussions with Jeremy and things on that, we determined that number was immaterial. We did not record it this year, talking about very small dollar amounts, but just something to keep in mind going forward, that this likely, as things become more web-based and technology-centered, will be something the district will likely have to capitalize down the road, whether that's an arrangement for some sort of software, or something we commonly see is the ebook sort of side of curriculum. That's coming up quite often. And the last couple of bullet points there are related to the storm damage and the insurance proceeds that appear to have been kind of cleaned up in 2023. The last small amount was received. And last bullet point relates to the Burt Rainey playground that was funded by some of those proceeds that exceeded the costs of the repairs. So there's still a small amount at year end sitting in fund balance set aside to complete that playground, which was done early in 23-24. So tough to kind of keep track of the years here, but at year end 23, that playground was not yet completed. It was done in, I believe, July, so right away after year end. So those, we kind of felt were the major events of the year for the district. Another one, as Jeremy brought up in his presentation, was the OPEB fund. Being exhausted of funds during the year, and he did a good job of explaining how that'll be on a kind of a levy pay-as-you-go basis going forward for your OPEB plan. Page 3 and 4, these will show you summaries of those full accrual numbers that we discussed at the beginning of the meeting. So I won't delve too deeply into those. You can kind of see there that a lot of the numbers are fairly consistent with the prior year on page 4 on the income statement side. Page 3, there's some pretty wild fluctuations because of pensions. And basically, again, those have a lot to do with their projection of investment returns and then how the actual activity gets rolled through those actuarial valuations. So I don't want to delve too deeply into that. Page 5 and 6 can be a little more useful. Here you'll see some summaries of your governmental funds, individually on page 5. So you can see your revenue over expenditures for each fund. The general fund, we discussed the decrease there, which was planned. And food service, community service, debt service, all had fairly good years. Positive returns in the food service fund, real solid return on community service. That's typically where you see a lot of deficits run for early childhood programs is a very common thing to see. But you can see you guys had a pretty solid year there with no help needed from the general fund. So, and debt service fund had a slight decrease, but as you progress through your debt service schedules and don't issue significant amounts of new debt, that's a common thing, is to see the fund balance decrease over time as you near the end of your schedules. Also, the state will adjust occasionally the debt service levies for any excess fund balances. So, as you pay down your debt, that's kind of the objective, is to see that fund and fund balance decrease. Sorry, not to skip over page 6, but that'll show you some more detail on your general fund. So your current to prior year on some of your revenue sources, and then the middle of the page, your expenditures. You'll see some fluctuations in there, a lot of it related to capital activity, repair activity from the storm damage, insurance proceeds related to the storm damage. If you take those things out, fairly consistent numbers. Page 7, I won't go through each one, but that'll give you some detail on each fund. So it'll explain what happened during the year and why. Kind of a common recurring theme you'll notice in there is earnings from investments were up and led to some favorable results. When you see interest rates go up like we did in 23, you'll see that reflected in a lot of your funds. And of course, we talked about the OPEB being exhausted, so you'll notice that going to 0 as well. Page 8 gives you some detail on your fixed assets and outstanding debt. So middle of the page there, you can see you went from about 3.8 to about 2.8 million in outstanding debt due to payments and no issuances. Going out into the future, we should see the CARES Act COVID-related money coming to an end. So hopefully, either next year or the year after, that also marks an end to the single audits. So that is to be determined, but that's kind of a couple years back what started to tip the district towards that requirement is some of that COVID money. In 2023, the legislature approved a formula increase of 4% and 2% for 23-24 and 24-25. So on page 9, you'll see your enrollment chart. Those kind of tie together. A lot of your funding is based on your enrollment numbers. So yours looks fairly steady going out into the future. Keep in mind, and obviously those are all projections and estimates. But in our area out here in rural Minnesota, we're seeing a trend of a lot of student count decreases, which will impact some of that aid from the state. So those formula increases can help offset those, the kind of overall trend we're seeing of declining student counts in these rural districts. couple things to point out in the report as a whole. We did take a look at on page 12 and 13, 14. Those will be your fund level numbers. Those will probably mean the most to you. I also want to point out on page 53 and 54 is where you'll see, some pretty extensive detail in terms of your funds. So there we present your original final budgets and then your 23 and 22 actual numbers. So pretty good summary in high level detail of the results of the year versus the prior, and then versus your original and final budgets as well. Page 81, I want to point out, gives you some detail on your federal expenditures for the year. So you'll see you were over 1.2 million in federal expenditures. Almost 500,000 of that came from the CARES Act money, the ESSER money. So the threshold, as we sit today, for a single audit requirement is 750,000. There has been some talk, and I recently received an email of kind of an exposure draft looking for feedback on increasing the threshold to 1 million. So you can kind of see there, if you pull that ESSER money out of your federal expenditures, you would be certainly well under that increased threshold if that does pass going forward, and also the current threshold. Page 84, I want to point out, is the audited balances from our audit report here in one column, and the numbers that the district submitted to UFARS through the Skyward system. What we shoot for there is matching balances, slight rounding differences in some of them, but basically what that tells you is the numbers that were submitted to the state prior to November 30th, that deadline, are in line with our audited numbers. So I won't, go through much more. A lot of the notes, which is the bulk of the document, explain your accounting policies, give some detail on your cash balances, and things of that nature. A lot of kind of repetition from prior years and things you guys have seen before. A number of the pages in the notes relate to pensions and the actuarial data in those valuations and OPEB, and things that actuaries deal with in terms of how they project and adjust things. So I won't drag you through all that stuff either, but overall a solid audit, unmodified opinion, no significant findings that we feel are alarming or warrant attention. Very routine findings in terms of audit adjustments. We assist with some full accrual items for those pensions. There were some minor collateral issues that we noticed throughout the year. Very minor, where I think one day that we noticed the collateral at the bank fell below the bank balances, and nothing to be overly concerned about. So overall, very clean audit. Jeremy, Denise, Tara, Rich, everybody was very responsive and helpful, and made for a smooth process. So we appreciate that. So I can take any questions if there are any, or if you'd like any elaboration on anything else in there.
Anyone have any questions?
I've got a question on
Yep.
the percentage of the unreserved
Yep.
budget. We're sitting at 26.7%, I think it was.
Yep.
That's significantly higher than I believe than last year. What do you attribute to that? Is that the investments doing better because of interest rates, or is that ESSER?
Partially, so that's, if we look at page, I'm trying to find a good comparison to show both numbers. I believe the budget to actual is back on page 53. So 55 shows the unassigned fund balances year over year. So last year, you were at about 2.3 million. This year, you're at about 2.7. A lot of that is gonna be due to numbers shuffling around between assigned and restricted categories as well.
Okay.
So, not only your operating results, but things get shifted. Like, for example, your projected budget deficit decreased nearly $200,000. So that's kind of a movement of imaginary funds from that assigned fund balance to your unassigned. You did actually show a, somewhat of a loss in your general fund, but that unassigned fund balance decreased because of some of that movement between categories. You'll notice operating capital also decreased quite a bit in that restricted area. And then your long-term facilities maintenance dollars actually went negative. That's one fund balance category that is allowed to go negative. That's just a function of the timing of spending that money. You are allowed to bring that negative and bring it back up over a certain number of years with your levy. So a lot of that is the accounting and moving money around between those balances. You will see also, if you look at your final budget, total expenditures on page 54, that is the number we use to calculate that percentage, and you'll see that that number is around $1 million less than your 2022 actual expenses. So a combination of things, decreasing expenditures, and shifting things around between those assigned and restricted categories. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Other questions? No? All right, well, thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions as you read through it, feel free to reach out.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.
All right, that will move us to report. 9.2 would be Mrs. Hanson.
Hi, good evening. I would like to start off with just an update on the Fagan Golf Tournament donation details. And while I'm kind of starting off, I think on the board report, you should be able to click on the outdoor kitchen link to see some photos versus me projecting. But the first item is that the tournament's donation will pay for the entire year of Healthy Snack Program, which is for preschool through grade 5. And I think I've shared this before, but one of the things that it's also allowed us to do is expand what we're offering. So for example, kiwis, clementines, watermelon, cantaloupe, things that we would never be able to afford otherwise. It's allowed us to do that. So it's been an amazing gift to all of us. So a big thank you to Fagans for organizing that. The next one we're really excited about. This is something actually that is I always say it's kind of been a pipe dream of many of ours at Burt Rainey for quite a few years, but due to the expense and just the planning, we were never able to pull it off. So their donation will also pay for all of the expenses that have to do with an outdoor kitchen. So I will not read through the benefits of an outdoor kitchen, I'll let you do that. But I do want to emphasize that the kitchen will be no cost to the district. It is fully funded through the donation. The total cost, including the landscaping costs, is right around $20,000. And then on the next page, you'll see that first photo. So it is going to be located up at the top, right next to the preschool playground. So I think you have you can see the color version, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So you'll see the red arrows. So that piece of property, it's really an odd shaped. And it, it kind of gets into like a V at the end of each side. But basically what will happen is that entire area, there's rocks, there's dirt, there's sand from, many years of doing different things there. The landscape quote that came in, that will actually all be removed. And our primary goal is to make sure that we keep those trees because they provide all kinds of shade to the current preschool playground plus that side of the building. And so we're doing in between the trees, and then the landscaper had measured out, so he had a formula for basically how far out from the trees the pavers needed to be placed so that it didn't affect the roots of the tree. But it's approximately a 20-foot wide set of pavers. And what we were looking for was something that would match the upper new preschool playground and lower, as well as when you stand there and you look off to the west, you can see all of the granite rock. And so the goal was to get that to blend in and to look somewhat natural. So that will have pavers. The pricing also includes a sand base, dirt, and we are going to have a couple fence panels installed on the west and the east side, and I'll kind of explain that in one of the upcoming pictures. And then on the ends where there is not pavers, that will actually be sod. And one of the things that the landscaper promised was that he will leave all of the hose and the sprinklers or whatever he's gonna have us use in place, and so we just have to turn them on, once or twice a day, depending on, if it's July or if it's in May, to keep that watered. The fire truck will be removed. Plans for that are to be determined. There are some pieces on there that are broken that we have pieced back together. So I think once it's out, Francis and I will just have to determine if it's something that, can be used elsewhere. So if you go to the next page, you'll see a couple of the photos. So the very first picture where it says components, that is the largest size of the kitchen. And underneath that, then the second picture, we're actually having the actual stove installed underneath where those pretend buttons are. And then we're also doing a hand water pump on one of those sinks. So that will be part of it. And then on the next page, you will see some of the other pieces. And by the way, back to that, that's what we consider the main kitchen piece. There'll be two of those, one on the west and one on the east side of the pavers. And then on the next page, you'll see where it's kind of a stainless steel table. There'll be two of those, and then the table next to it, there'll be two of those also. And you probably have noticed like a sage green and then a redwood. That is what the company has deemed to be the type of wood and finish that would be the most long-lasting without a lot of maintenance. They're not going to last forever, but they felt like that would be our best route, is to do that sage finish, which again matches, and then the redwood top. We've measured, we will have the circular picnic table that you see there. That will actually be not the color you see, but it will be a green and a brown, and that will be placed in the center. And so the children will have, a kitchen on the west side and the east with the seating in the middle. And along with that, there's some, various pieces of what we call it's almost like a cement food pieces, but we're gonna also have your traditional kitchen pieces that we've been collecting from thrift stores and garage sales, and so that if a pan walks off, it's really not a big deal. As far as after hours, we'll also be picking up some waterproof aprons as well, but our ECFE, our preschool, and for sure our kindergarten classes will be able to access that, so, as well as the community after hours. So questions on anything with the outdoor kitchen?
How well is like that stuff? Is it like secured?
Great question. It is not secured to the ground. So that very first piece is fairly heavy, and I actually did not bring the pounds with me, but I know when we looked at that, in my opinion, it would take a couple pretty strong adults to move that large piece. The smaller pieces, I would guess you or I could probably lift those smaller ones with you for sure, Mr. Winter, I'm sure. But, you know, the other thing out there also is our security system. That is the best view of any place out there, is up on the top. So, for the most part, our community and our students have treated our new playground and the preschool one very, very carefully and have taken good care of it. So we're very hopeful. I do anticipate a few pieces might get lost, you know, the pots and pans and silverware or whatnot, but we're ready for that, so.
So when like football games and stuff, is somebody gonna like oversee this? Is that kind of?
Well, we could do a couple different things. I don't anticipate someone would be overseeing it, but like any of the small pieces could be moved into the shed that's right there. That would be my recommendation. The other thing is we do have in our quote a couple heavy-duty covers for like the main components. Now, if they're like my house, I'm not, you know, they keep the water out, but you have to remember to go out and put them on. But I think for home football games, we could have that on our checklist to make sure that gets done. But that's a good idea as far as home games. Other questions? Okay, if you think of anything, please let me know. The other two areas that the donation will take care of is, we have a weekend food program that we use that provides some resources for students on the weekends. And so there were some funds from that donation that went into that account. And then the other thing that we call it, we actually have a committee that oversees this donation, but the other thing that the committee opted to do was to purchase the Burt Rainey yearbooks for all of our students. You probably remember your kids getting those softcover yearbooks. Typically, less than a third of our elementary students are able to get those each year, and they're a really important piece for a lot of our kids. And so, at least for this next year, every preschool through 5th grade student will get one. I know we have students that go through Burt Rainey every year, and they've never been able to get a yearbook. So we're really excited about that as well. Because right now, a typical price is anywhere from $13 to $16 per book. So, parent-teacher conference results. I had just basic things last time, but I did want to share. So Burt Rainey had 90.7% attendance, but we broke that down. And we had 273 out of 301 students represented. So of the 273 that were represented, 251 were face-to-face conferences between those two nights. 22 students were either done through an IEP that was scheduled on a conference night, or if the parent requested a phone or an email conference, that was done as well. But again, IEPs, phone and email totaled 22. And then we had 27 no-shows or no contact from families for those two nights. The other thing, I just wanted to keep up with the READ Act update. I know last time I shared some basic information on the 3 programs that districts in the state of Minnesota can select from. If you happen to click on that link, you're going to see you'll see 4 columns, but that's because letters is divided into 2 options. Either the letters, which is for kindergarten on up, or early childhood letters. And then you'll see core, and then the Care I All program as well. And the state has us organized into 2 phases. And I will say I did a count this morning, and right now for phase 1, Burt Rainey is at right around 80% already of all of our teachers have either completed it or are in the middle of the training. So in talking to quite a few other area principals, that percentage is pretty high, so I'm really happy about that. And the ones that have not enrolled yet, have some things, whether they're in the middle of their master's program or maybe their family has expanded. And so I'm anticipating those that are left, we will be working with them in the next couple of months or year for sure. The only other thing I wanted to mention that's a change on my report is the ECFE holiday happening that was happening last week. At the time of when I saved this, we were estimating over 50. It ended up being, I think it was like 68 people came to that event. So again, a big thank you to our ECFE staff for putting on so many amazing programs. Questions for me?
Okay, thank you for
Yes.
all the information.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
thorough.
you.
Thank you. All right, Mrs. Hens. Good evening.
Hello. I've been cold all day, so I'm really happy to be sitting in front of the fire now this afternoon. I think you have 4 links on mine, probably. The first one would be the link to the December newsletter. And it's packed full of things we did at the very end of November, all the way up to now, till the end of this month. And Crystal, again, put all of this together in her amazing way. Some highlights. Again, is our Frozen Fun Day. We have things going on for everybody, 6th through 12th grade. The kids are really looking forward to that. We have our holiday choir concert. Still have Buzz Club. Buzz Club started off with pretty low attendance, and now today is Monday. We are running it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and there were quite a few kids up there asking for help. And what's really cool about that is our kids that are in National Honor Society, they have to put in so many volunteer hours, I can't remember the number, but they come if they're able, and they tutor the younger kids in their classes. And Ms. Plasek was sharing that she watched a senior guy walk by his buddy he was working with last week and gave him a high five in the hallway, and I was like, that's pretty cool relationship building. So if you see her and those kids, thank them. Leah's back here. She took the students through a YMIC retreat. I was able to attend with them as well. That was super fun, and the kids were very well behaved, and we had a great time. December 7th is the senior etiquette. Oh, that already happened too. Sorry, that was the next day. We did everything in like 4 days, and I was exhausted last week. But the senior etiquette breakfast, I believe Leah sent me a very long email when she got back talking about what an awesome experience it was to see those kids in a different light than we normally see them. And then also on December 7th, we were very fortunate, you've probably all heard about this, that we were able to see the first look out at the Hangar 4 unveiling. And I can tell you, I was like, taking 8 buses of kids out to one site was like, a little nerve-wracking in the beginning, and they were amazing. They were so respectful. We had a great time. They watched this movie. It's over 300 people, and then they had the Navy reenactors there, and of course we got cookies. They got to ride out in like a truck, which I didn't really know they were doing that at the time. I panicked when I walked outside, seeing them driving around. I'm like, okay, that wasn't part of the deal, but they really, really were very respectful, so we're very thankful to the Fagans and seeing that museum, so that was pretty cool. They were lined up, I don't even, from the front of the hangar all the way to the back and wrapped around waiting to get the autograph from, where's the first name? But he's 101 years old, and he sat there and signed autographs, and they were just mesmerized by that. So, backside, we did there's our basketball champions. We did Native American Heritage Month is in November. We had a Spirit Week, and the good old FFA delivery. Leah has the senior alumni panel when students come back and talk to the seniors about college or career or whatever that might be asking them. Our e-learning, which, knock on wood, maybe we'll never need this year because it's never going to snow. But Music bake sale, Cade shared that they baked over 8,000 cookies that weekend, so that was pretty impressive. Cinderella, the commitment to graduation was a really special event too. The first annual, we're gonna do that again next year. It was short and sweet and to the point, and I thought the kids really thought that was something pretty special. They were so nervous. It was just them and just their families, and they were just like quiet and not talking, and their shoulders were up, and I'm like, you guys relax, it's okay. They were dressing up and all sorts of stuff, so. And then Crystal added some Beating the Winter Blues and some more things about mental health resources, so lots more to come. And anything, questions, comments on any of that information?
It's just really, really unique. The newsletter is really great.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. 'Cause, yeah. There's plenty more that I think we sometimes forget when we get in that daily grind of, things that you're working on, and then how much really fun things we have going for kids, and they've been amazing, so. The third and fourth, I think, link, second, third, and fourth, are about our math review, our math curriculum review. We met last Friday as a math team, and we took units of instruction that we're currently doing, and say I'm a geometry teacher and I'm working on whatever content it was. We pulled the 5 curriculums we have, and we looked at our approach on how they would teach it. And then we went kind of vertically and horizontally within the curriculum. We're not done yet. We have some more presentations set up. We eliminated a couple of them right away because they really didn't meet our standards, like of course they said they would. So that is pretty intense work. We're meeting again on Friday, and we'll be bringing a proposal to you, Mr. Schneider, in January sometime. So, and then along with that, the next 2 links are, this morning we had 2 consultants, educational consultants from the Service Cooperative. They were doing the work that I probably would have been doing in this job from my job from last year. We went into 8 different classrooms of ELA, social studies, and science. Jen Schwankel and Natalie Delmonico, and they both have intense literacy backgrounds, which is really impressive. So we each went in there, and we collected data on the 20-minute impact survey, which you have linked there, and then another document called the Classroom Data Collection Tool. And what I think is really powerful is the bottommost positive and proactive classroom management about how providing most or all the students with opportunities to respond during instructions. We want really active, engaged kids versus compliant and, compliant kids versus that. So we're collecting data, working on some professional development areas that we're going to be moving forward during this school year. So that was, that's always fun to get into classrooms, and it's fun to have eyes of people that don't normally work with all of our staff like I do, so, yeah. So that's what I have for tonight. If you have any questions or comments or anything.
Questions?
May I be excused to the basketball game?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you for the intro.
Thank you.
Cheer loud for me.
They were losing.
Oh, shoot. All right, and now the district report.
Okay, so we've been doing a lot of work on the emergency safe and sick time. So we have the procedures already shared with our 2 unions, the EMYME and MSEA. We'll talk about that again when we convene for negotiations, but we think quite a bit of the work is done. One of the biggest things is being able to communicate the leave available to staff members in real time, and so we're going to have to adjust a Red Rover and use that as a time card for some of our employees. Right now, we just use a paper version of time card for our custodial and food service staff. So they have to be ready to go by January 1st. So a lot of scrambling doing that. So Tara and Jeremy have done quite a few webinars. I think that's ready to go. So Denise right now is acting as our guinea pig, or will in the next couple days. Calendar, we're working on our calendar for 24-25. So if any of you are interested in acting as a parent representative for a calendar meeting, please let me know. We'll get some dates out to you. Usually we can meet just once and be done with that and then bring a proposal here to the board. So, right, if you're interested in that. Denise has done some work with strategic plan and a poster. My vision is that these would be, we would have some professional posters done and put up in every classroom and major room throughout. We would get those professionally developed, glossy, and hang those up so they mean something. One thing, and I know we didn't spend a ton of time on our strategic plan, but I think we felt we were pretty comfortable with the previous strategic plan. And so we tried to build off that. So this really should be meaningful to everyone in our building. So it will be nice to have that in front of everybody. That's what we agreed our strategic plan was. Next item, website. So we are working feverishly. Crystal is working feverishly with a lot of help from Denise on getting that ready. Our hope is that we can do a soft rollout, meaning we'll have two websites for a short bit before the other one goes dark. The other one will eventually be totally inaccurate, so it will need to go dark, meaning not exist at some point. We're hoping to buy a little time because it's going to be hard to have all of that ready. I don't know about you, I was disappointed in our last website when I do a search and I could find things from 10 years ago. Yeah, it was inaccurate. Well, we're going to try and address that in more than one way. So it's going to cost us about $500 a year that the search you do on our website should be just what's on the website. Meaning, don't go out there searching the web, Google, to find something that is somewhere in the cloud. So that's our intent anyway. Art club trip, I figured with all that we have here, because we still have one very intriguing, I know you folks are just chomping at the bit to get the world's best workforce report out to you. Wink and nod, but many of you have seen it already. But we're going to hold off. Tamara Eisfeld will come in January to present on her proposal for a European trip in June of 2025. You know, one area that some school districts, in talking to superintendents, especially the one that I was previously at, Blue Earth area, one of their committees that they use is an activities committee. January is an organizational meeting, so we could establish an activities committee, so please give that some thought. I know Ron right now serves as our Minnesota State High School League representative, so I don't know if that's a natural fit, but it could be. Then the next item I have is a streaming video discussion. I thought that went pretty well. Maybe you want to talk what you took from it, because you're the only one.
I'm the only one that's here tonight. Yes, the meeting did go very well. I think that we all learned a lot about NFHS, how things work, how things operate, and then also as compared to Huddle, which is another service that some of our schools around us are switching to. You know, the cost differences, which were surprising. I mean, a lot, the Huddle platform is, it costs a lot more. There's a lot of schools that are kind of just moving to that now, so we were kind of at the point of, we want to maybe wait and see how things go for other schools before we would make any changes. We got a lot of really good information from Tim. I really appreciated him coming to meet with us, and he had all kinds of, it was like a 4-page document of, kind of the breakdown of everything. I don't know if that's posted out here or not, but.
No, I didn't attach it.
Okay, but, yeah, so anyway, it was a very good meeting. We did not feel any need for changes at this point, but something that I think we'll continue to kind of monitor. Through some of these other platforms, we can access that, for free through other schools, so we might do a little bit of homework on that and just kind of see what we think about it, so.
I think the thing that resounded, or two things resounded with. Number one, it's quite a bit more money.
Yes.
All right?
Yeah.
And number two, it's basically the same technology.
It is.
So I think we're seeing less problems with NFHS at our site, but a lot of that is, Tim had mentioned, learning how to use it correctly.
Right.
And we would have that growth.
If we switch to
Problem?
something else, it would be the same thing, right? Learning how to best operate things, and so I think things are improving. So, yeah, like I said, at this point, continuing with what we have, but kind of monitoring and, seeing how things maybe go for other schools first before we would jump in and have, I don't remember what the cost difference is, but it was quite a bit more to switch to a different platform.
I think you did have some of those documents on there.
Did I have it?
Yeah, because I recognize
Linked?
the grid that Laurel has in front of her.
Yeah.
but-
Oh, yeah, there it
Yep.
is, streaming comparison. Thank you.
But like, some of the cost to the individual person that wanted to say watch a game, I noticed it was like $7 to watch a game. Does that go back to the NFHS, or does it go back to the school in any way?
So the NFHS, we do get it kicked back on annual subscriptions.
Only on annual.
On annual, okay.
So if somebody is paying a monthly or a per event, we don't get anything from that.
Okay.
But the annual subscriptions, we do get, I don't know if I made a note on that, but,
There's something.
but there, yes.
Yeah.
Do we know how many people come that annual?
I believe he said there was 25 in the district, yeah.
And I think in that meeting, two of us were
And two of
sitting
us were there, so.
I pay for it.
I pay for it as well, but.
So, unfortunately, when we visit other gyms, we have no impact on that, so.
I think it's nice that you guys had a meeting and could fill us up, because fill us in, because that was something that people are wondering and get
Mhm.
questions about. To hear it's a lot more expensive to do Huddle is definitely important.
Okay, the next item I have is a Minnesota Indian Education application. So that's submitted. We did complete that. There's a link there that shows that. So you can see where the budget is at, what we're using it for. It's basically developed in consultation with the Parent Advisory Council. There's about $87,000 we get to use from the state for our Indian education programming. Fiscal host for MVCC. So this was talked about a number of years back, that MVCC they originally had talked about dissolving it. That's not what we're proposing. We're proposing doing the same thing that Merved does with the Montevideo School District. Merved fits under their umbrella just as a fiscal host, but Karen Jacobson and her staff do not report to the Montevideo School District. They report to the Merved board. Well, that would be what we would like to propose for MVCC. The biggest thing in my mind that we gain from it is we take our two financial systems and put them into one, we gain a number of things from that, including only having to do payroll once for each group. We do our MSEA, our hourly people, one payroll, and our certified staff payroll in another. Right now, it has to be done 4 times a month. And we have to do 4 things related to health insurance. And all of those benefits have to be done for each organization. So there's a lot of redundancy there that seems a little unnecessary. We don't know if we can go that far. We just are investigating it right now. We've contacted MDE, and then we've also contacted our attorney to take a look at what things would be impacted. So
Would Angie and Katie still be run through an MVCC payroll? They would not?
not payroll. They would get a check from us, but they would report to the MVCC board.
They would still be within our financial,
Correct.
so
Yep,
everybody would.
that's how Mervet does it too. So Karen and Brandon and their staff all get them on a video paycheck. We're just in the process of starting to talk about it. That's the intent with me putting this out there. That link of bulleted information is good for you to look through. We would like, ideally, a decision could be made before July 1st, so we're ready to do that. I don't think we want to wait till July 1st to make that decision. We want to be ready to go by July 1st, if possible.
Areas we gotta look at and see, obviously.
I think it's a big advantage to us. It does help the employees too. A great example is if you're an MVCC employee and you work for YME as a coach or a substitute, that PERA and TRA on your, mainly TRA, on your earnings is not collected, and you don't get the benefit of that towards retirement. That's just how that system works.
If we did something like this, would that make that possible for bi-monthly payrolls?
Might. That's a separate, it would make up that second payroll. Other questions? About that?
I just had a question about seniority list, but it looks like it's on here that himself to be sorted out.
Yeah, seniority lesson one, we have to figure out, would that just be a separate list within the contract? That's what Mervet does, separate list within the contract. And then it also, you would also have to establish reports too. When you do the seniority list, you would use their hire date from that they currently have in the seniority list. So. All questions that are yet to be determined. All right, then I'll move on to my last item before the World's Best Workforce Report is Policy Committee. We did have a Policy Committee meeting and just did not have time to get a lot of those policies on here. So I know we said we would have a bunch of them on the December board meeting, but ask for grace and we're going to try and put them on the January board meeting. I didn't want to rush through it either and not do something correctly. So, questions about my report?
world's best workforce.
Okay, I'm going to try and display this on the way I can get some help from audience members. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is the World's Best Workforce Report based upon last school year. So the MCA data will be from last spring. Graduation data is going to be the year before that, because we don't even have graduation data on last spring. We have anecdotal data, but not the most current ones. This is a requirement each year. It is changing now, going forward a little bit, and I won't bore you with the exact details, but if you think about some of the things that pass in the legislature, that's going to impact it. So, this report was actually submitted already to MDE. They just keep a copy. They don't critique it or anything like that. Here's the 5 bullets that we have in our current World's Best Workforce. And so we'll go through each one of those, and then we'll talk about, or Leah will talk a little bit about achievement and integration and those 2 goals associated with that. So, Lisa, you want to talk a little bit about your area?
Absolutely. Area 1 is all students ready for school. And this is an area that schools have a lot of options as far as how you're going to measure things. And so we have a readiness document that preschool teachers use kind of as an exit. And then the goal is that 75% of children entering kindergarten will be able to complete 80% or more of the skills. The hard part with this one is that it's really like comparing apples to oranges. So for example, the state does not have specifics on what students do you count. So if students are enrolled in Little Stingers or Head Start, we have a process for that. Head Start works very closely with us. They do the assessments, so does Little Stingers. If a child attends a local daycare or maybe just moved into the area and has not attended Burt Rainey or Head Start, we still actually include them. And so in a way, we're pulling data on students that in many cases we've known a day. And so what ends up happening is for all of our new kindergarten students, we actually will either try and have them come in for like a 15-minute time in late August, or for those that enroll like the week before school starts, our title staff will assess them that first week of school. And so that number varies, but it's just really difficult to compare it. We tend to look more locally at the students that are in our preschool program and Head Start and say, how are we doing? You know, because our preschool really focuses on those pieces, and then kindergarten does as well. And so just a couple other points of interest. So for this school year, we had 53 incoming kindergarten students that were assessed either in May, August, or September. Of the 53, 29 were able to complete 85 or 80% of the skills. 24 students who were not at that 80%. Of the 24, 9 did not attend our preschool program, and 10 were already identified from either birth to age 3 as being on an IEP. So again, there's just so many variables that it's difficult to look at these numbers year to year. We are anticipating a statewide assessment with some very specific guidelines of what students you assess and when. I'm anticipating it could even come out for fall of '24. So I think that will be changing. And then we would be able to have more of a parameter of, do you include students that did not go to your preschool? And then we would have something to compare to other schools as well. I will not read through the improvement strategies, but if you have any questions on those, please let me know. And then the next area is an area of significant concern. And this shows that how many of our students in third grade are proficient on the reading MCA. So that means students that either met or exceeded. And you'll see that this last year, so this would be our current fourth graders, only 10 of our 30 met or exceeded on the MCA reading test. So we have a lot of concerns about that and obviously are working towards assisting those students. This is by no means an excuse, but it is a point of interest to me. So this year's fourth graders, which you'll see here, are the students that were in kindergarten in 1920 that missed, a good chunk of their kindergarten and also first grade. And so I know that many districts in the area saw these numbers go down, especially for this year's current fourth grade. Again, ours are low enough that's not an excuse. We definitely need to do better and are working towards that. But it was interesting when you looked at even statewide averages that has gone down considerably. I also will add, just as kind of a positive, so our current sixth graders, so as fifth graders at Burt Rainey last year, our fifth graders were actually over the state average at 61%, with the state average being 59.3. So that was definitely a big positive, and a lot of kudos go to the staff that worked really hard with those students K through 5. So, any questions on either area 1 or 2?
So, one thing, I think it's important to understand that this isn't a measure of just third grade teachers. Okay? This is maybe even our preschool, all the way up to there too. So
Absolutely.
it's passing the baton, just like she said, for the current sixth graders, last year's fifth grade. I mean,
Absolutely.
A lot of people can take credit
It represents
for that.
Burt Rainey. I mean, it's not just third grade, because it's everything that it came before then, so.
yeah. So, and my understanding is now, everybody will be achieving third grade literacy. We'll be able to do that every grade. And so
Yes.
the world's best workforce is changing to be on grade level.
Absolutely. So next year, and they have not rolled out the template for the plan yet, but what we are being told is next year it's not going to be a focus on third grade. It will be every grade. And so we'll be able to look at first graders, who's at grade level, who's not, and then we'll really be able to track them, or you will also be able to see that tracking from year to year of, they won't be the exact group of kids, but the majority will stay the same. So that will be interesting to track as well.
Is it safe to say too that really having them on grade level by the end of second grade though is a pretty important milestone?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Like that's where that came from. So that wasn't just something they grabbed
Yep.
research.
There's a lot of research out that shows how difficult it is to get students caught up after that third grade time. Our ELA committee has put in countless hours. We are, this is actually our second year of going through the ELA curriculum review process. And we will be bringing to you a proposal for a new ELA curriculum, which will be the first one at Burt Rainey since 2012. And we are working through, we've learned a lot, and then we will be waiting for the January 1st release of the approved curriculums from MDE. And we are hopeful that at least one of our top 3 will be one of their top 5, so.
And we're really hoping for the funding to pay for that too, because if you heard, Stacy's talking curriculum too, and those that sit on the buildings and grounds, we have limited resources, so we're gonna have to sharpen our pencil to make sure. But curriculum is a good investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The third one is close the achievement gap. Now, so we have to interpret this a little bit. So first of all, we want to increase their proficiency on the MCA reading by 3%. That is tied to if everybody increases, especially if we can focus on our different demographic groups, we're going to close that achievement gap. So when we say the gap increased by 6%, that's poor. If it decreased by 21.8%, that's good. All right? One thing to keep in mind, and just like Lisa did, I have to be honest with you, our MCA scores did decline again last year. So that decreased gap by 21.8 also is a comparison that our overall students decreased. The way we develop this gap is we take a look at the non-members. For example, we'll compare Hispanic, Latino to all the other groups without them in it, and same with American Indian. Free and reduced, that one's pretty obvious. We're comparing those students that are not economically disadvantaged to those that are, and then SPED to non-SPED. All right? Unfortunately, with World's Best Workforce, they do not give us a lot of guidance on this gap. They just tell us to use the gap. So, Area 4. So this one also matches an achievement integration goal. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this goal is our shared goal. We found that it's really important if we're working together in integration with all our other schools, so the 5 other schools, that it makes sense to have a goal that we're trying to achieve together. And so this is our 11th grade goal around having 2 or more credits towards CTE or college level courses. So really just preparing them for their future and having experiences. This year we did reach 100% of our students, so 39 out of 39. Our current senior classes are one of our smaller classes. But everybody has reached that. So that's a fun that we've gotten to that point, that we've continued to grow. Some of the ways that we have gotten there are, so we worked really hard with Adam last year. And Minnesota West, we created this class brand new, really first in Minnesota, as the Dean of Education, Commissioner of Education came out and applauded us for the class that we created with him. Wouldn't be able to do it without him and the students who were interested. And so what they call it is a college-provided professor. We went to Minnesota West, and he now is an employee there, and he came into YME, so we know what works best is having classes in our building. Our students being here, it's just their comfortable space, and created this class, this Intro to Indigenous Nations. So he taught that last year. It's a 3-credit college class, and we're doing it again this year. So we continue to kind of move and morph that, and see how we can make it grow and different types, but currently it's the same. We always have our College Now classes, so students earn credit through SMSU. And these are just our teachers in the building who are certified to teach College Now classes, and we call them concurrent classes. So in the building, last year you have to have a 3.0 or be in the upper half or upper third, so juniors upper third, seniors upper half. That continues to change, so they have, going into this year, they change it and more students have access to this class. Same with the MRVCTC, so that's the Minnesota River Valley Career and Technical Education. These all are the same classes that we continue to offer. So welding, CNA, Intro to Ed, Intro to Healthcare, Powerline, and then an internship type class. So students do not have to have a higher GPA, so it does have a lot more access, and they do these classes either online or in person at Minnesota West. And then the other way that they would earn it is just the traditional classes here, but through our CTE teachers. So through all of those combinations and all those different enrollments and all those different buildings and online, we got to 100%.
I think it's important to note that it's both tracks too. It's the trades track or workforce track too. And then the college track students also. Awesome. So graduation, like I said, we only have the official results from 22. It takes till about February before we'll know the 23 final results. But 22, we had 98.2%, so 53 of 54. And there's sometimes some underlying circumstances why someone will continue. It might not be they failed, it might be continues for a variety of reasons. The 23, we're projecting to be 98.3. All of that's well above the state average. State average in 22 was 83.6, and we were at 98.2. Of course, we don't know what the state average is yet for 23, so kudos to everyone on their work there. So, you want to then touch a little bit on?
Yeah. So this is the huge part of the other half of my position. So we receive funding based off of our protected class. So it is based on enrollment, and then the formula included with protected class. Protected class are our students of color. We are the racially isolated district as of last year. It has changed going into this year, but we're reporting on last year. So all of our member YMIC or schools join us. It's required to do one event to get achievement integration funds from the state, but we do about 11 to 12 to 13. And it depends on what type of things are happening in the community and then what we create as well. And so those are just a list of events. The junior college trip, the Indigenous Art Day, we were at the Upper Sioux community and brought in 13 Indigenous artists and shared them with our students, and they got to learn their skills and their crafts. We do a senior trip up to NDSU and Moorhead, which is a really far trip that students don't always get to go on, so we wanted to create that for them. Our Career Expo, we do that with the co-op that happens every year. The college fair is something that we go on. The 9th grade trip is specific to YMIC. We go to Minnesota West and explore all of the careers that exist there. Our 9th graders get to do that. Major Madness is an event that was highly promoted by the co-op. It is really for our first generation students and our students of color. And so we bring them to show them that college is for them, even if their family in the past didn't go to college, or if traditionally, when you look in the doors, there aren't students that look like them. And so they really just wanted to expose them to that space. And they do a really good job of it and kind of telling them all the different organizations that exist there to help support them along the way. Jewelry manufacturing, we do that every year. We bring 20 students. Junior Business Tour is something that we do alongside Pick and Marshall. They get 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon of just touring different businesses in Marshall. That's just a YMIC event. The Be the Light Retreat, same thing, that's for 9th graders, so how to kind of start your year off as a 9th grader and being kind. We bring in a speaker. The Tour of Healthcare is just with 3 different schools, and then the Jeffers Petroglyph, we do that with Ivanhoe.
I want to point out, if she didn't coordinate this, I don't know that a lot of this would happen. It brings us together, and I know it's a ton of work, but without bringing all these schools together, I don't think we'd have the clout to get these organizations' attention. So, just our 39, 40, 41, I think, seniors now. I don't think that would be enough to spark some of these organizations. So, thank you. So we do have these 3 goals, which are generally we have to write, and that's the last year of last year's.
Mm-hmm.
And so are they the same 3 areas?
Same
Sorry.
3 areas, but our goals are a little different going into this year. But yes.
So the first goal, go ahead.
Yeah, so just the goal that we discussed previous, so the goal that we share among our 6 school districts together.
So this is the same goal for all of those member districts. So then, unfortunately, or Fortunately, last year, we had one teacher representing one of those groups that was teaching here. And now this year, that's no longer the case, but we had met that goal last year. How is this going this year? We had 5 last year, right? How many do we have this year?
It does not seem as though the class is running, so so last year, the class was, typically an in-person class that we would do, but it moved to online format, and we had 5 students enrolled. We had more at that point, but 5, just because students know themselves and they know, and going through COVID, they know whether or not they can be successful. So we had honest conversation with every kid. Do you want to do this? Will you succeed? So 5 are in it. Thus far, we've had 1 student do an intro to ed class, and I think that might be it, unless other students, currently, if you're talking about this year, because this class will not, at this point, be in person. It's an online format.
Yeah. And then this is just data we calculate, just because that's our 3rd goal. They're proficient, 28.2, but as I said, we saw an even worse trend with the rest of the population, so. Right?
How do we let students know about the CTE and college classes? Do we reach out to them and say, hey, you're eligible for this?
So every class is existent in the registration guide.
Okay.
And so every student would be able to would see that when, they're in their registration, and on the sheet that
What if
they
they
have.
didn't know that they could, or that they didn't qualify, or if they weren't in the top half or the top third?
Yeah, so I always, so emails for sure go out to, like, you qualify for a PSEO class, come to this meeting. So I send those out to all students that have, so currently right now you can have a 2.6 or higher
Okay.
to take a PSEO class as it continues to morph. So those emails go out to all students and parents if you qualify. And then I have a meeting, and that's always juniors and seniors, so that's who qualifies as juniors and seniors, 2.6. And then the registration specifically, like the CTE classes, those are all in the registration guide. And then we do bring in Bruce and we just did a presentation from the CNA teachers as well from Minnesota West, and Bruce, who's the CTE, MRV CTE, and bring him in and present to students.
You do that to every class?
So the CNA was to juniors and sophomores. Seniors already would be at this point where they really are set within the credits that they need to take. And the CNA class was offered in the fall, not the spring. No, the spring, not the fall, and it's full. Yep. So we can always make it better in communication for sure. So any ideas would be great, but it's definitely on the sheet that they register for, that parents sign off on. It's in the registration guide, and there are presentations as well.
Doesn't like the whole sophomore class go to the little theater too, as part of the registration process?
We do bring them all in, yes. Yeah.
So, and though, it would be hard to individually contact each parent in another way. Unfortunately, we have to work with volume. So, making that individual phone call.
Were there advisors made aware?
Yep.
So they talked to them about the advisory then?
Yeah, so that sheet is signed off by their parent and it's handed out during advisory. So, yeah, the registration sheet.
But like those that are eligible, are they spoken to individually during advisory?
PSEO wise?
Yeah, for any of that.
If we're trying to
CTE or
increase that,
PSEO,
if we're trying to increase that and there's students out there that qualified but they didn't know they qualified, how are they gonna know if we don't tell them? Or maybe they just weren't confident enough to think that they could be.
So, Yeah, I mean, emailing them and having meetings, asking them to come to the PSEO meeting. You're invited to come to this meeting to learn more about PSEO and what you would like to take.
Yeah, I don't think half the kids read their emails.
Yeah.
It does go to parents too.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah. That's complicated, because not reading the emails wouldn't be the goal that we're working for, as like going into a PSEO class. Like
Right.
that it's so independent.
Design.
I mean, there's sheets outside my door that they walk past every single day that they could grab if they want, that have a PSEO contract and a PSEO signing up. Word of mouth is very strong among our students. They know what PSEO privs are, so not being in the building to be able to take their PSEO class.
That might motivate a lot of them.
Yeah,
The freedom,
yep,
independence.
yep. Yeah, but I mean, any sort of, like, if we need some sort of, like, I do think the registration sheet and the registration guide, even though it's thick, it really does explain everything that's in it. But, I mean, if there's like some sort of what exists outside of this building, we could do that too, but, I mean, you can continue to create, but I really think what happens the most is that they hear it from their peers, really, is where the strongest energy is, but I will say communication, it feels like, is very strong on all fronts to families and students. I mean, when I work with students, I say, delete all but your last 50 emails. I talk to them about that all the time. You don't need anything beyond your 50 emails. You have 300, you need to delete all of them. This is a skill that you need. We talk about it all the time. with
Yeah,
students.
and it's not just some online PSEO classes that those kiddos need those skills for, because like, and the three of us have talked about it too, we have a hard time, some students aren't even doing their work, and we don't necessarily get to know that information. It's a college course. They're not monitored as well as a high school kiddo.
I'm just asking, there's some students out there that may not have known that that was an option for them.
Yep.
Just because you sent out an email doesn't mean that they should know.
And I think it kind of goes to the whole, like, what kind of conversations happen at home that, about what they are capable of doing or not capable of doing, and you don't know what you don't know. And so some of them may not have those conversations at home, therefore they don't know. And I know you meet with every junior, right?
I'm working towards that, but
You know,
every senior, for sure.
Every senior, for sure, but like if you meet with the students, my guess is this kind of comes up too. So there's a little bit of a layer. Maybe it's this, not the junior year, but it's a good question.
Yeah, it's definitely something that can be improved. Yeah. Any thoughts around it and how students could know? I mean, we reached 100% this year, so students seemed very clear on access. So any thoughts on how we can continue to communicate to students and families? I think that's just fine. But for sure, when it comes to traditional PSEO, like email is key. And so if we definitely have to get better at reading email. So if we're not, that's already a barrier to begin, because you independently do everything online. Your labs, your everything's through your D2L. So that gets complicated. So it's like this kind of balance, because you want students to succeed as they have their first experience outside of this building.
What about the PSEO classes inside this building though?
Yeah, for sure. So anytime students are registering, I'm a strong encourager of it. So they're very different rates. So PSEO is per credit that we pay, and those classes are like lump sums. So I am always, if you qualify, I'm a strong encourager. So 100%, that is something that I do all the time. So I even suggest you should take this class. It would be something traditionally that you do. You can see last year in our rates of students that took PSEO classes, we had a lot of students that took them. So, yeah, because we don't pay per all the students, we pay per room. And that's where we succeed the most, really, are in those traditional in-building classes.
Because they've already built a relationship with the people in the building. All right?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
So then, just a little bit more about MCA. So you folks have heard about the Minnesota Report Card. I encourage you to look at that if you're curious about data about or comparing us to other schools. But of course, there's 3 major areas in there you can look at. How are students doing? Are they mastering the standards? And then it gives you the different tests, results, and participation. One thing I want to point out, that if a student or a parent, it's called a parent refusal to take a test, if they do not take the test, they do not meet the standards. And that's how it's calculated in the Minnesota Report Card. So it's a parental option, though. And then this whole slide deck will go out onto our website. It is already. Denise has it out there. And like I said, I submitted it in a report, about a week ago. So we are in compliance, right?
Great.
Thank you.
That moves us to committee reports. So policy committee met on November 15th. Viewed a bunch of things. We have it on here. Spent a lot of time on this.
We got the official smudging kind of document to review based on all the meetings we've had with the American Indian Parent Advisory Council to date this year. I know their goal is to get that on the board agenda as soon as possible. I think we reached a point where we were looking to recommend it for board approval. There's a couple questions we answered.
Yeah, it's on the agenda tonight to talk about. We reviewed a bunch of other policies too. That you're gonna continue to look at and put on in January.
Yeah, there's a series of, that we need input from staff on. Some that we don't need to change but are new anyway to look through, like the dress code policies. They've done some significant revisions to that. And then some stuff that's not in effect yet where they haven't even finished passing, like, was it policy 603 related items?
Curriculum.
Yeah, policy
Mhm.
603 is defined as curriculum development. So some of those are being delayed, just to make sure that when we do it all together in a cohesive way.
Any questions about it? I think we'll talk about smudging when we get there, so we'll just go on with the rest of the reports. The Curriculum Advisory Committee met November 20th.
It was World's Best Workforce.
Sure, we heard that presentation. Do you want to elaborate on anything else?
No, I don't think so. I guess if I'd add anything is remembering that some of the curriculum will change, as he alluded to also. So that curriculum will be discussed some through our curriculum advisory committee and how that could be implemented. So such as ethnic studies, genocide and Holocaust, etc.
Okay. And then, District Technology Committee met November 29th.
Did you folks, did something go out to you folks so you knew that it was coming up? It did come up, okay. Just making sure. So we talked about the website, as we talked about already tonight. The needs for 24, 25, and, you know, the possibility of using some E-rate dollars, which was also discussed at Buildings and Grounds. So, what we would need in the immediate future, gave people an update on the internet service provider, which we're going out with requests for proposals through Southwest West Central, because LCTN is being, basically it was absorbed by Southwest West Central, so we'll have a new internet service provider starting next year. Hopefully that's seamless. Talked about phone service. When we lose internet, have you folks heard that from many parents that can't make a phone call? Okay. So you can, right, Lisa?
Correct.
So, yeah, so when we lose internet, we have to jump onto our cell phones and kind of scramble that way, but PA system, we have somebody coming supposedly this week to take a look at the PA system in this building, because when we lose internet, we lose our PA. So, we'll see what that would look like. Then there was some discussion about keyboarding, where that might fit in. And then Google Classroom, we paid to have that integrated so that Google Classroom would integrate with JMC. Hopefully that's going smoother for parents. We did some new line training, and yeah, talked about hallway displays. They appear to be working, and then we have new printers, but we are having a period of growth with our printers.
Finance Committee met November 29th as well. We had a busy night.
I'm sorry, I didn't attach the agenda to that, did I? See if I can get that up there. Maybe you want to go to the next committee and we can talk about that, and then I'll get this up here.
Well, it's Buildings and Grounds.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything on that one either, but they met on December 6th.
Bringing up the minutes right now. Yeah, so we talked about the facilities analysis and when we could expect to see that. A little bit about what they did while they were here. We don't have any results of anything yet. So hopefully we see that within the next month or two, I'm hoping. We went over the history of our buildings. I thought that was kind of an interesting point of the age of our buildings that we're at, about when each structure was built. I'm trying to bring it up here while I'm talking, but the internet is not fast. So just a quick fun point for the rest of us here. In 1930, the original school building was built, and then in 1952, the Granite Falls Elementary School was built. In 59, they added on to the elementary school, and then in 65, they added on to the high school. 1980, the Esplin Gym was built, and in 1985, they added elevators to both buildings, I believe. And then in 2004, the track was built, and and 2010 and 11 is when they did the air quality, and then of course 19 is when they did the auxiliary gym. So those are just kind of interesting dates in a timeline that I saw when I read them. So that kind of bled into what they're doing with the facility study and where that could take us for the future, with just knowing the history. We talked a little bit about the history of the Wyoming district with Prairie Smoke and the driving range. I guess, Ron, maybe you want to elaborate on that a little bit, or?
Somebody had shared something with me, it was from 1968, they talked about that, there's some land out there, they kind of discussed how, at that time, they were projecting the possibility of a new school in 12 to 18 years, which would have fallen around 1980. Not sure what happened with that, not really sure where it ever came from, but it came from a piece of history with the city, I think is where it came off. But that would have been around the time the gym was built. Obviously following from there, it would have been, where the rest is, but just found it kind of neat that 1968, they were looking at Pullman thinking that we were going to do for the school. The year was set.
So we also talked about the step railings that were repaired over by the doors for the band and choir rooms, that those were completed. Had an update on the fire alarm system at BRE. We're having problems with the voltage drop. They replaced the batteries in the system. That seems to have corrected it, right, Rich?
Yeah.
Yeah. So went over some issues in the art room with some moisture in the walls. Francis was going to do a little bit more investigating on it, but in the room where the kiln is, there's moisture leaching through the wall, and the paint is bubbling out. There's some efflorescence and some mold on the wall, so we're trying to figure out what is causing that.
I did get, our indoor air quality says it's not, their experts do not believe it's mold.
Okay,
They believe it's all efflorescence.
that's good.
We ordered a camera today to try and look down in the wall.
Scope it.
So,
The BRE storage shed was leveled. We didn't really have any update on the long-term facilities maintenance or capital outlay. Rich, you want to explain the E-rate a little bit?
so the E-rate is money that you pay for on your phone bill. And what we do is we will get a discount on our purchases. So what they're proposing is to replace those access points in both buildings. So there's approximately 80 of them. I think that was the number, right?
That's, yeah, that sounds right.
Sound familiar? Anyway, so, and if you want to refresh, that agenda item should be there now. We would get a discount on that. So roughly, if our free and reduced count is 50%, which it looks like that's what it would be, we would get a discount of about 80% of the cost of that. And I did find out from Darren today that that does include installation because they install that. Darren and Scott will install the access point. So we did go ahead and we've got an RFP ready to go.
We talked about other projects that Francis was kind of planning for the summer, and one was the entrance doors at the main gymnasium, and then the doors right out here on the east wing. Getting quotes to get those replaced. They're showing their age. Had just discussion on a custodial maintenance ticket system, so if somebody has a custodial or a maintenance need within the building, they could go online and put in a ticket through the system so that Francis has a system that would track those requests. One, they don't get lost, and two, we could rate them in order of severity, so that if it's something that could be handled later, he could do that instead of that taking away his time from something more important. And then a signage update. He got a quote from Schwickert's for the flashing and the vinyl lettering in the front of the school, and that quote was $4,929. So we discussed that a little bit, but we didn't make any recommendations. recommendations or decisions on that. That was it.
All right, then if you want to hop back up to the Finance Committee, we talked, because I believe Sonia was the only board member there, right?
I was not.
I don't think you, were you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one on the 29th?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, looking at the agenda. I had it on my thing here. With Mrs. Hinz not being the curriculum director anymore, we're contracting with Southwest West Central to help us with some of that review. Part of we lost impact aid. Some of the audit stuff got some delays with MDE, and some of our signatures were missing in documents. We lost some funds there. And we didn't have time to correct them because of the due date. Compensatory aid anticipated to go up for fiscal year '25. But it's not yet fully determined as far as what the grandfathering in our number is going to be, quote unquote. Because we won't be tracking it with the forms as much anymore. They'll be determining based on. So that was we weren't going to lose as much as we anticipated based on our prior year numbers that we actually this fiscal year. The '24 fiscal year which is, we had the big increase for once lunches were no longer free and reduced. So that was good news. Combining the financial systems, we talked about that a little bit, which we talked about earlier. Where was it? Rich's report. And his financial management software, we're looking to move over here because it's cheaper and better support and locally out of Marshall, I believe. Rich?
Correct.
For Jeremy, I guess you're still here, you haven't left yet. And you saw the audit tonight, truth in taxation. And then we talked about staffing and how we're looking at, writing out next year to kind of figure out where the funding ends up and what we're going to look at for deficit spend next year a little bit, but then we'll have a better idea financially what we can support as a district. Head count and that kind of stuff with all the changes that have been made.
We did talk a little bit about kindergarten expected to be at about 50 students for next year too. And so if you look in the first grade, those 53 will go up to second grade. So we're going to wait as long as possible, but it looks like we'll have to hire another elementary teacher for that second grade position. That cuts both ways. That's a good thing,
It does.
but it's costly.
So 53 entitles, teacher.
There's already 3 kindergarten teachers.
There's currently 3 kindergarten and 3 first grade.
It's just that they'll
As they move up, and that'll be probably through.
I think first grade, 2 sections, 27 apiece. I think that's right. I'm just saying that because that's my wife. So I can say. I wouldn't be very popular.
No, she's listening, she
The door won't be locked with you.
So then, along the section size thing, the other thing that's hard is you look at middle school and high school. So it's hard to reduce a teacher, middle school and high school, but you may have to get creative. But the good thing is we're moving out 12 or 40 or 41, I think it was, at the end of last week, 41 seniors, and bringing in only 34 sixth graders next year. So. Got a little bubble there that's it's a tough pill to swallow.
Anything else you want to touch on for that, or the rest of them are on there?
I don't think so.
I think we, I
Okay.
mean, the big thing at the end is just a summary of all the different positions we have throughout the school.
Yep.
And, I mean, it's just something to think about as we go into next year.
Yep.
What can we afford to support as a district based on our budget? And once we get our numbers kind of rounded out, you know, with all the legislative changes that have been made and the requirements that are coming from it.
All right, thank you. Any other last comments on committee reports? All right. Moving to new business, we start with personnel items. We've got two resignations. We'll take them together. Middle school, high school paraprofessional Ashley Goodwin and junior high football coach Evan Fagan. Both of their letters are on board book. Looking for a motion to approve those resignations.
A motion to approve.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. New hires, there are 4 of them. Outside.
Should be a fifth one there too.
Is there?
Maybe one.
Oh, it just out of
Yeah.
order.
Yeah.
Should be 5, actually. So, outside maintenance lead, Matt Frericks. Special ed paraprofessional, Carissa Peterson. Assistant boys basketball coach, Dylan Lindstrom. Junior high boys basketball coach, Jeff Lolum. C-teen boys basketball coach, Dylan Woodford. Looking for a motion to approve those hires.
I'll make a motion to approve those hires.
Second?
Second by Zombo.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. And then, the next one is a resolution, so roll call vote, to certify the proposed levy for 2023-24. There a motion to approve that levy?
I'll make the motion to adopt the levy.
In a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and it is roll call vote. We'll start with Director Winter.
Jeremy LeBlanc, yes.
Dawn Odegaard, yes.
Matt Zumble, yes.
Laurel Christensen, yes.
All right, motion carries. The next item is approval of the preschool rates.
So Lisa has done some work on this, and maybe you want to, would you mind explaining it?
Sure. The document that you have in front of you is just a quick bird's eye view of a very detailed budget that we keep for preschool. One of the things that Keisha Lawaji, our early childhood coordinator, and I do every year is going into a year, we take a look at anticipated funds. So students come in different categories based on what rate they're receiving, whether it's a full pay preschool, reduced pay based on free and reduced lunch app, or if their family receives free and reduced lunch then they have the lowest rate for preschool. We also look at anticipated number of special education students coming in. For the most part, we can be very close on this. We also look at different types of revenue that we receive, including state aid, special education reimbursement, and what we call Pathways 2, which comes from Minnesota State. So what you'll see on that document is our current rate, which, just as a reminder, bumblebees is all day, every day. Honeybees is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, all day, and busy bees are Tuesday, Thursday. The other thing that we do is we compare it to area schools, just to make sure that we are never out of line. And in looking at things again this year, we actually are falling underneath area school rates. Mr. Schneider, should I give some examples?
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, Lakeview, their published rate for 5 days a week is $555.80, and our recommended is $450, so we're under, right around that $100 less. We also compared it to Dawson as well, and we are cheaper than Dawson and Montevideo by quite a bit, so. Any questions? The rates for 24-25 are listed there. We typically do not send out preschool information to families until the spring. This year, our goal is actually to get it out after the first of the year. This last year, we went from 3 full sections down to 2 that are very full with a waiting list. And so our goal now, we've basically got everything ready to go except for approval or not of our rates. And then we'll be able to get that information out to families for registering in early January, which will give us a better indication of incoming and what we'll need for staffing.
Okay.
Any questions? We did try, you'll notice, we tried and we succeeded. We kept our, so if you'll look at like the free rates, the only area that went up was the all day, every day, and that just went up $5 a month. Otherwise, you can kind of compare going down. We actually have another spreadsheet that we use that we calculate cost per day for each program. And so if you're a parent with a busy bee, what our estimated cost is and what your cost is, and we try and keep that ratio very close. So one of the reasons, like you'll see busy bees did not change, is they actually are a little bit on the higher end of per day cost than the other ones. So
That's the 2-day a week?
correct, yes. The other thing I'll just notice, so if you'll look, total estimated revenue, that amount assumes that all bills are paid in full. That has never happened. So just to be real clear on that. We're probably in a higher percentage area this year than we have been the last couple of years, but we do have families that, children go through preschool and they do not pay, so.
Thank you. All right, any more questions for her, or if not, we are looking for a motion to approve the preschool rates as presented for 24-25.
A motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Second, there's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Membership renewal for the Granite Falls Area Chamber of Commerce.
We have been a member for quite some time, so.
There's a benefit for us to be on that.
Yeah, I think it promotes our community.
Is there a motion to approve the membership renewal then for the Granite Falls Area Chamber of Commerce?
A motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. And that leaves us to the approval of the fiscal year 23 audit. there a motion to approve the audit that was presented this evening?
Motion to approve by Zampel?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is a policy update about the Wyoming smudging regulation. You want to talk any more about this, Rich, or what do you?
Well, so, I don't want to speak for the policy committee, but I know a lot of background has been done on this. It's been presented to the American Indian Parent Advisory Council and also at the Pursuit Board of Trustees. So there at least have been, not at least, they have been actively participating in this development.
Since last summer or last fall?
Last school year.
Last
yeah.
school year.
Almost probably the beginning of last school year, maybe even the spring before that, the discussion started.
So what questions do people have about the smudging regulation?
Why are we choosing to call it a regulation instead of a policy?
So it didn't have to have a first and second reading,
Why would we want to circumvent that?
just because of the length of the process it took to get here. That was the discussion, right? I don't want to speak for
Yeah, I
the
thought it had
policy
something,
committee.
I thought it had something else to do with the formality of a policy over the regulation. Do you remember?
Did we talk about in regards to if it's a policy and something needs to change, then you have to send everything back through, whereas the regulation,
We can modify.
we can
quicker,
modify as,
faster.
Why would we want to do that?
That is a great question.
What would be so
that we-
important about it that we would just want to modify it without discussion, or with a quick discussion?
Well, the biggest thing was that nothing would change without consultation with the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee and the Wyoming School Board. So there was definitely, like if anything wasn't working or we had to come reevaluate it, that the American Indian Parent Group would also be involved in that. So very much a cohesive document working together.
That couldn't be done with the policy.
Do you recall? I think that you're wondering about like the first reading or second reading.
Yeah, I'm
or,
just,
like, should
you
we
know,
turn this
we
to
don't
a
do this
first
with any
reading?
other document. If we need to make something for the school, it's policy. So, see, we're creating a new category for this one document, I don't know why.
I guess too, there's not an MSBA policy that pulls in all the components of a normal policy in my mind.
Sure, but we can-
So
we
do
can-
we want it to look that same way?
We can
That's-
have our own policy outside of MSBA, though, correct?
Correct, yeah, but,
So the question maybe is there any reason it couldn't be called a policy and converted to a first reading? Is that what you're at? I don't remember anything significant why we couldn't, so I don't really.
yeah, and I don't know that I have any good example of that either.
We talked about it a little bit, it had something to, I just don't remember the reason. I've always taken the position that because this is new and there are not a lot of schools that have it, that we should just make sure that we're really, like we've evaluated everything and the parent group was on board and that we just have tried to catch everything. We realize that it may have to be adjusted if there are things that, the staff bring to us, Berta brings to us.
Is that something where we could make this a trial policy? And so that there's a set point in which we review it in the near future, whether it be a year or 6 months or what have you, to see if adjustments need to be made before it's a permanent policy?
Ever been done? I mean,
Well, a policy, you establish policy, if you want it, to have certain review, that can even be written into the policy.
Yeah, I mean, if there's concern that the parent advisory committee is not involved with the modifications of it, we could make that a part of the policy that they are to be consulted.
It's part of the regulation.
It is part of the
Okay,
regulation.
so then it's already in there.
Yeah, it's already in there. I like the idea of reviewing it because it's just new. Like, we don't know how often is it gonna be utilized, and I certainly don't have a problem with either.
I think part of the concern of the American Indian community is that they wanted this enacted and us to have something when they first came to us with it, like within a month or two, was the impression. It's been a year and a half. So I think part of, when we talked about it with them and Rich during the advisory committee, was what if we need to make a change? Is it gonna be another 6 or 8 months? What if something doesn't work? Can we get it to, how do we get it fixed? If something in here we need to address. And I think that's part of the reason Rich was talking about a regulation, is that it's something that if they find a concern and bring it to the board, because in order for it to come to this point, it still has to go through policy committee. So then, if it's got significant changes as a policy, it takes longer to get corrected, if there is something wrong. Or we need to make a change from one side or the other side.
It still
As far as
follows
it's
what he's saying,
impacted.
why would this policy be any different? If it takes 3 months, changing it takes 3 months. I mean, we have things put in place for a reason. We can't really help that it took 2 years to get to this point. We can't, change how we're saying this because of that reason. We still should stick to our grounds.
Well, I think it's taken this,
Well, it doesn't mean it will go faster. It can go faster if we needed it to.
yeah. I mean, as we sit here tonight discussing this, I don't know why we have to call it a regulation. I don't remember anything that stuck out with me, about that, and if you wanna, we didn't specifically talk to the group about a trial, but I don't know if I'd wanna call it a trial as much as just that maybe we just review it, because it's a brand new policy.
Yeah, I'm only speculating that it took that long to get here because it's such a new ground for
Absolutely.
schools as a
Right.
whole.
Well, and we
There was
wanted
always-
to
Right.
get input from everybody.
And I agree with that, and I understand the urgency to get it in place. I'm not trying to discredit that at all. And I don't know that I agree that a regulation versus a policy, maybe you lose a little of the fluid motions to make quicker changes, but whether there's a change in this regulation, it still has to come to the board the next month. We only meet once a month, unless we do a special meeting. So it's not like we're holding up that much more by doing a policy review. I mean, if it was that important, the policy committee could get together more than their quarterly meeting
Yes.
to
Sure.
make those conversations happen.
Do you have any,
So where do we go from here then?
do you have any strong opinion about if we just change the word regulation to policy? And based on our agreement with the parent advisory committee, do you think that would be, like, we meet Wednesday, but do you think that just changing the word would be impactful?
No, I don't think that would be, I don't think they had anything,
They
they would have been
didn't-
fine
they
with the
didn't-
word policy.
Right.
Yeah,
They
it's more
didn't-
just the.
They didn't have any.
Right, they didn't have, Rich was kind of the driver on the regulation versus policy as far as his comfort level for enacting it, so.
I think the other hard part of this is, we're being asked to vote on something that we're not even twice tonight. So I personally would like to table this till another meeting.
I've got other questions moving forward. We got to discuss the rest of the documents, so maybe we could just pause on that policy conversation for a second and move to the first one. So the purpose. So in the purpose, it calls out practices including but not limited to opening ceremonies, individual group smudging, feasts, pipe ceremonies, powwows, and drumming and singing. Of all of those categories, only smudging and pipe ceremonies are listed. So is this policy including all these other activities without individual guidelines on how all that will
So, so the smudging for individual uses and classrooms, that is not really part of any of those things. Those are ceremonies that would be covered by pre-approved events and event spaces.
So do they have to be listed in this policy?
Well, I think they are because they have the process to do a pre-approved event that would include those, where they would meet with administration, talk about the parameters. You know, I'm trying to think of some examples that they used about
So,
something outside.
so those activities would be then followed or guided by the pre-approved events and event spaces part of this?
Correct. Say we had a YMIC art
So
event.
how do I know that by reading? I didn't pick up on that when I read this many times.
It's a good question, because we've talked about it so much.
I'll be honest, I've read through this multiple times, and it's hard to comprehend what we're actually going to try to do, so.
To be
I
fair with
ask-
the conversation, I'm not against this at all. I want to have a policy that is, start off with the chance of having success without confusion.
So the first part is the purpose of it, all right? So that's why we're going to have a smudging policy and the purpose of smudging in general, all right? So that's the purpose. Then it talks a little bit about smudging and pipe ceremonies, just as a general description. And then it goes into, those are the events that could happen. This is the notification requirements that we broke into 3 different categories: individual uses in offices or workstation, classroom spaces, outdoor spaces, and then the other ones such as pre-approved events and event spaces. Then it goes down to, well, after all those, what are the responsibilities of everyone involved? And that's building administrators and manager of facilities. And then we added other considerations.
So is this a smudging regulation, or is this a Native American ceremonies regulation?
It's smudging related to all of those events, because each of those events has different expectations. Because if it's a ceremony, the number of people involved is different versus smudging. We're going to do smudging, is meant to be an individual thing.
So an example that they used, and I will apologize if I get this wrong, please hop in, but is that the staff said that, you know, sometimes it helps to, like, recenter the student, and they're really struggling, and that allowing the individual piece of it is they can do a smudging ceremony, one-to-one with that student, or maybe that student, there's another person that wants to be with them, and that's why there's some, if they're not a Native American student, then they would have to have special permission from a parent. But this smudging is like a recentering, so that they can, do this and then get back in the classroom and back.
And I think I understand the intent of the smudging activity itself, but I'm still confused on where the feast, the pipe ceremonies, the powwows, and the drumming and singing come into this policy.
So all of those events could have smudging involved.
would they take place in our school?
So they might have approach administration to do an event. It might be during American Union Week or something outside, and maybe there would be drumming and singing. And they will have already approached administration. Those need a special sort of
So it.
planning.
Pre-approval.
Right,
Approval.
this defines from a small, one person in a room,
Right.
all the way up to large events held at YME. And covering all the different types of events that could occur
Yeah.
from individual.
Is there more language we could add to this policy to make that clear? Somebody without the extensive conversation that the policy committee has had with parent advisory committee on it wouldn't understand what you're saying, because I don't.
Yeah, do you think that the purpose could sort of separate out the larger events that need pre-approval to the individual type? Is that, if it was like clearer in the purpose?
That could maybe help. Because I think we're talking about the smudging activity, but then I read there's all these other activities. But the rest of the entire policy only talks about smudging. So where do these come into
Because
play?
we're not approving, this policy isn't approving those other activities. It's approving whether or not smudging can occur at any of these activities.
Well, then there's a
Such
lot of
as
extra
abuse.
words in there.
Pardon me?
There's a lot of extra words in there then.
Yeah.
But smudging could be a part of that opening and closing.
I like the description you just said. That clarifies it up, but I don't get that by reading this.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that says that would take place outside. Am I reading this correct?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily have to, because a pre-approved event and event spaces could be inside. Ensure the room is.
Right, what
is
I'm trying to
reserved.
say is, I mean, say you're gonna have drumming and singing. Where would that take place if English class next door is doing whatever, or the math class? I don't quite see how that would work in the school.
So,
Everything in here is about approving it prior
Yes,
to.
it's all
So
pre-approved.
approving the
I
circumstances.
totally get that, but.
And this isn't defining what is approved and what's not approved. This is just general, this is what needs to be approved, and who and what and why and how is left up to administration to determine, just like you would for any other event.
So then,
Right.
the next question I would have is, the space would be completely enclosed and ventilates to the outside of the building where this would take place. Have we thought that through? Where do we have a room that is vented outside? Do we need to bring fresh air in? Do we need to cut off the return system through the school? How do we keep it contained in one spot? I just think there's too much happening here that we don't know. We're not really ready to go forward with this, unless you guys know from your meeting how that would take place.
Well, see, this wasn't to define how that takes place. It was
Well, how do we approve it if we
require.
don't know how that would?
I think it's a fair question, is how,
Well, it's required that it meets the Minnesota, I mean, we have to meet the Minnesota Clean Air Act, right? That's a policy for the school that we have to follow.
That's fine.
So that defines
Or
what can.
Or what you're referencing around, so in the individual use in offices and workstations.
Right.
So it says in there that it needs to be completely enclosed and ventilated only to the exterior of the building.
If you're
But
going
once-
to use it.
Well, once you get into classroom spaces, it doesn't say that.
Just for the record, I mean, I'm not trying to drag this out, but I'm not quite sure we're on the same page.
well, this is exactly why it's taken so long, because it's new,
Right.
we want to make sure that we're thinking of all students. And so it's good to have fresh eyes on it, which is why we probably need to,
It's like for us, this is really the first time we're getting this deep into it.
well, we are also missing 2 more members tonight. For a pretty significant policy.
Well, I mean, I can see, yeah, that
Not
you'd
technically
want to
a
move
policy,
the
but-
pre-approval through building and district administrator, list that underneath classroom spaces as well. Right?
So once we would approve that policy, we would have to have that capability in place within our building. Do we have that, or could we have that?
The what?
The ventilation piece. Do we have that ability, or could we have the ability, once we approve a policy, then individuals who want to take advantage of the policy would want to do so.
They would want to do so, and I wouldn't want us to implement the policy until
That we can't deliver.
everything, that we can't do it, like,
Right.
oh, we passed it, but we're not ready. Like,
Right.
that is something that we need to
Well,
make sure.
but, you know, a person could interpret it, the space is completely enclosed and ventilates only to the exterior of the building. I'm sorry, that office doesn't provide that, you can't use that office.
So
We're
where,
right.
where would you?
Well, there's spaces where, don't you think, there's probably at least a couple where there's no, remember, influx of air isn't taking it out of here, it could be opening a window. Because there might not be an air return in every room.
What
Might
does
not
that-
be.
What does that regulation say? I mean, how much CFM, how much air exchange is required for this to happen? Let's say we have a kid that is allergic to it next door. I mean, how can we guarantee that
Well,
when
we're
this
gonna
takes
have to
place,
identify the kiddo that's
how can we
allergic.
guarantee this space that we can change the air back to where it needs to be after this takes place? You can't guarantee you can do that. You can have the wind blow in the wrong direction, but accomplish that one day. I mean, we have to think that through a little bit more. I mean, I'm sorry, but if it's gonna happen, it's gotta happen in a way that we can guarantee that when it's done and they open the door and walk out, that room is fresh. And until we can do that, I don't see how we can go forward.
I know the tribe is gonna donate air purifiers to.
But there's nothing in here that says air purifiers. There's nothing saying air purifier is gonna,
This says a space completely enclosed and ventilates only to the exterior of the building, and it only says that in one spot. I'm not saying that won't work, I'm just, the policy doesn't read that way.
You're saying under each section, it should almost be
Oh, can you put it in each section then?
duplicative, so that it's either, or the spaces are individual office workstations / classrooms will be, the same, because I did read that, I did notice that when we did a review of this, that,
has there been like a survey? I mean, are we aware of how many kids are doing this now? I mean, outside of the school? Can I ask that question?
Well, yeah, no. I don't know that we would have that information, and
Wanted to ask.
I also think that it's, our Indian Education Department is going to use it as an opportunity to teach what the culture teaches. So, and there'll be some students that don't participate.
Correct.
So how much smoke would be generated from a smudging ceremony?
See, that's a problem. There's too many things that we don't know yet.
so I think we need to have like a discussion about like, would it be beneficial to have someone from the group come in? Roberta, or the chair of the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee to help educate us
So,
on it, especially the people that, don't sit on the Parent Advisory Committee, like, we've heard it.
See, I remember about a year ago, we talked about smokeless smudging. That was kind of the last thing I remember.
We did talk about smokeless,
I
yeah.
don't ever remember moving.
They didn't want to
They don't want
proceed
it,
with
they
that.
don't want to proceed with
I
that.
know, and that's what I'm saying, that was the last presentation that they gave to us, if I remember right, as a board.
Right. Kind of when it was first.
Yep, and I mean, we haven't
Wanted policy.
presented anything really since then.
so are all of our rooms only heat detection, or do they have smoke detection as well?
suppression.
Yeah, so how would you prevent a fire alarm from going off if there is smoke detector? Like this room here, I only see heat sensors and the sprinklers. I don't see a smoke detector. But if there is smoke detection and it picks up smoke and calls the fire department and they respond, every time they respond, that's a $750 bill.
That's a big deal. So it needs to be in a room where there isn't a smoke detector, potentially.
I don't know
Or-
if all our rooms are like this one. I should know, but I don't.
Yeah, I should know too, but I don't.
I mean, I think when you get to this point, this is good conversation about things that haven't yet worked out for implementation, so it needs to be kind of worked out a little bit more.
And some of it is just by nature will be trial and error, learning as we go. But I would like to have as much in place before we start as we could have.
So did you write down some of this, Rich? I know that like the purpose about being really clear that it's not about having those events, it's about whether smudging can occur at those events. And maybe it's hard to separate what's an individual versus a bigger event because it says it could be individual or group piece. I mean, some of that might be.
How many schools allow this now? Just curious.
Of course, we wouldn't know all of them, but I do know Duluth and St. Paul Public Schools. That's all I'm aware of.
Well, I think we are not in a position to vote on this, so I think that we need to get some more information. And we do meet with the parent advisory group this Wednesday. I mean, I guess we could bring back some things.
Yeah. So, just so you're aware, so I designed this when we did it. I took it directly from Duluth's smudging regulation. And so that's kind of where this came from, just so you folks realize that was some work put into that too.
Well, there's a ton of work you put into it about trying to make it clear.
And maybe we need to reach out to one of them and kind of see how they treat the room where this takes place. Just to see how much is needed. 'Cause we don't have any, I mean, obviously.
Is that something I think we'd be doing to reach out to? I don't know.
Sure. We'll do that.
So at this point, I think this is a table discussion. Where are we at on the word regulation versus policy? Do you want it to be policy, or as long as it's reviewed? I think we need to re-identify.
I guess my hang-up on that was it's just different than we treat all other policies, directives in the school.
I'll make sure this gets in the agenda too, but I'm sending you an email with the Duluth regulation, so you can look at that after the board.
They
meeting.
call theirs a regulation.
They do?
That's what I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, that's what I just shared with you. Yep.
Okay.
So is that where the regulation probably came from?
Maybe. What else would you need to have more information about it, so we can check out some things? We could talk
talk to the group on Wednesday, the three of us, and everyone can be there, Matt? On Wednesday?
Would we want ask someone if they'd be willing to come and speak to us about it?
It might be helpful to know,
Just since it's something we don't know.
right, to educate us on what does the event look like? Is that something they could share with us? I mean,
We can
if we're
ask
talking
them.
about just a little bit of smoke, that's one thing, or are we talking about a room full of smoke? That's another. What are we talking about?
I mean, in the Minnesota Clean Air Act, everything I've read still applies to
Right.
the act of smudging, and if it's being carried out within a school building.
Right.
So we still have to
I'm guessing
follow-
it's on the
right.
smaller side, but I
Right.
would like to know that.
Yeah.
Procedurally, can we table? Do we need a motion to table it?
Sure.
Do we need a motion to table it, do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be,
I think it's
just so you
appropriate.
formalize it.
Yeah,
And
to
then
have
if you
a-
want it to be a policy, drafted as a policy, here's, I don't know,
Do we know what St.
it's
Paul?
going to be uncomfortable if we drag out
Exactly.
Yeah.
too
I'm right,
much.
I mean-
Okay, so if you wanted a policy, I would say that right now.
The intent isn't to drag this out. The intent is to have a clear regulation or policy, whatever we name this, so that there isn't any ambiguity in the future that can cause this to not have a successful outcome.
So is there any other reason, Rich, you wanted policy versus regulation or vice versa?
Do we,
Your opinion?
do we know, what St.
At this point, I don't,
do we know what St. Paul calls?
like I said, that was a year and a half ago.
St. Paul.
St. Paul's also on there too.
Right, do we know what they call theirs?
I will look here, give me a sec.
I would agree with Rich.
Theirs is a policy. There's policy 540.00, smudging. Adopted August 23rd, 22. It's very vague.
I mean, so's the one that you sent from Duluth.
Right.
so-
I think in some ways we've defined more than some of those policies have defined in ours. But
I-
there's not a lot to go on.
Oh, this
between here and
policy is
Canada
tiny.
and-
The same policy. It's not even a full page.
Yeah, I think the St. Paul one gives you less.
Oh,
Well, but I
yes.
think we wanted to
listing
protect our
type.
administrators from very tough, different, and challenging.
Conversations.
Yeah. But,
If
I
we
mean,
look-
really, a general format of a policy fits this regulation too, so it's, I would just kind of try and align it with.
Within our board policies, do we have guidance on how we?
Policy development?
We have guidance on policy development, but we don't have anything on regulations.
Well, if there isn't a significant difference
Right.
between the two words, policy and regulation, I kind of agree with Jeremy. Why would we introduce a new word that doesn't cover policy when we have policies that govern policies? But then now we'd have to make that an amendment to that. So maybe we come back with this with the word policy and make sure that all of the regulations in the different sections are either combined or all-inclusive, so that we're not missing, like, if you read one section, it doesn't have the same verbiage.
what is the board thinking? I'm not sure what you want to do. I mean, I'd be willing to find another date to get together as a policy committee, if that would help, rather than wait. I don't want to wait 3 months or whatever.
When's the next policy committee?
That'd be great.
That one's,
Where's that line?
Sure.
It is not till February 8th.
Would it be helpful to have a work session to discuss it, and where they would come and present to us and educate us a little bit more?
I think with as many questions as probably will be asked, it would probably be best.
That may speed
That-
things along a
that may
little faster as
speed
well.
things along.
Well, then it's a much more a free exchange of information, questions, and we can kind of work on the policy together possibly.
Okay.
What do you think, Rich? Is that a possibility?
Yeah. Well,
A work session in December.
Yeah.
I mean, that would technically be that's not possible.
It'd be
25th.
The 25th.
Yeah.
26th.
That's not possible.
No. I like the idea of a work session. It just gives us a lot more freedom to really talk about it. But
Does a work session have to be Monday, even though that's what we've set it aside as?
Would the...
What's that? Yeah, no. it won't.
not the 18th.
and the Monday after that is
It's
Christmas.
the 4th Monday. It's technically
For work
Christmas.
session, we have to have
The
notification.
25th?
Right, I'm talking midweek that week?
Of next week?
So,
Like the
Of
27th.
the-
so the Wednesday of next week would be a Mervet board meeting, which is,
Some,
Amanda would be gone for the board meeting.
somewhere between the 26th and the 29th is what I was thinking.
I cannot commit to the 26th to the 29th. I may not be here. You
Neither.
guys can do it.
I won't be here the 27th. I just think it's a bad plan to do it that
But
week.
we could
Okay.
turn around the 2nd.
Of January,
Yeah.
Week of the
the
second.
week before board,
Yeah.
have a work session.
Mhm.
And then possibly include it on that agenda for
Do I have anything
either
on the
first
3rd?
reading or
Right.
approval as a regulation, depending on what's decided.
I mean, it's gotten this long to get here, and if we need a few more months to get it hammered out, that's what we need to do to make this successful. So I think work session and ask someone to come and answer some questions, and we all take a little deeper look at this. Right?
Wait, yeah,
So
most
would
of
the
this are
2nd work?
Is it a Tuesday?
Tuesdays. Second and third work for me.
I mean, I'm sure it works for me. I
Yeah,
don't.
the 3rd works for me also. 2nd or 3rd. Do either of those work?
Well, the nice thing about doing it before the next board meeting is that gives us time to have something at the board meeting. in
Yeah.
January.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be a
Word
policy,
progress.
it would have its first reading on the 8th.
Correct.
So which do you want, January 2nd or 3rd?
Well, the 3rd is a Wednesday, so I'd say probably the 2nd. But
Okay.
it's right after a holiday, so I don't know how people feel about that.
I mean, they both work
Fine
for
with
me.
me.
Ron?
Ronald, are you free?
I mean, look and see if
I think so.
there's anything on the calendar. I didn't look, I just looked at my
Is
calendar.
it the first day back at school?
Second
Like
is-
I missed the
Yeah, the second is.
Second
concert.
First day, yeah. The concert?
Yeah, I missed the concert for negotiation.
Mm.
There is a junior high, nope, nothing on Tuesday. Wow. Women's League Volleyball, anyone?
Nope.
And there's nothing on Wednesday, January 3rd. Whichever one you want, and then tell me the time.
Well, when's a good time to start a work session? 5:30? 6?
Five 5:30 or 6?
5:30.
5:30?
5:30.
Preferably not 5.
Not 5, because it's hard for Sonia, usually 2 for 5.
Okay.
30 works.
We will schedule a work session for January 2nd at 5:30.
All right, so then, I think to be a little formal with this, is there a motion to table item 11.1, adoption of the Wyman smudging regulation?
I'll make a motion to table the smudging regulation for further comment and clarification.
And a second? All right, there's a motion and a second to table that item. It's, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, no discussion or correspondence. There are some upcoming events. Parent Advisory Committee is this Wednesday, 13th at 4. Negotiations is next Monday, the 18th at 5. Merved Board meeting is December 20th. Christmas break, no school from December 22nd through January 1st. It should say 2024. Board meeting is January 8th, but we're going to have a work session on January 2nd. And then we will move to a closed session pursuant to Minnesota statute, section 13D03, for the purpose of discussing the district's labor negotiation strategy relating to negotiations with employees